Welcome, Bruchim Abbaim. I'm Rabbi Paul, your virtual rabbi who has stopped coughing enough after a few weeks that I can start making videos again, and you have found Beit Virtuali. Now, before I took my several-week coughing jag, I recorded a video on logical fallacies, and the more I've thought about that video, link down below if you haven't seen it, the more I've realized how important this series is. But I haven't gotten a huge reaction yet, so let me know if you want to hear more. But I've realized that I think that these are more important because as I've analyzed more and more logical fallacies, the more I realize that not only is this just how we exist, but we've begun wearing some of these as a badge of honor. So that's going to make part of this video a little bit difficult. The three logical fallacies that I'm dealing with today, the appeal to ignorance, the appeal to authority, and then the appeal to emotion. The further I get into it, the more I'm going to find universal fallacies, ones that we all use, including me. But not only that, we've begun to change society around some of these to where these logical fallacies have become centered. And so I want to let this be a dialogue. If you disagree with me, let me know. But I'm going to try to add some nuance into this because the use of a logical fallacy is not necessarily fallacious, and there's usually other things to consider when we're in dialogue with logical fallacy. And if that makes no sense whatsoever, keep on watching, take a deep breath. Let's get through all of this together. All right, the first one, I think the easiest one to deal with is the appeal to ignorance. This is our warm-up, all right? So this is the ad ignorantium. I always love throwing in Latin, right? One of the first things to note about these is there's new logical fallacies appearing all the time. That's part of what happens in every generation with new technologies, the internet age. But a lot of what I'm talking about today comes from an essay from John Locke in 1690. So these things have been discussed for a while, but other scholars have noted that, hey, these are really going back to Plato and Aristotle, so classical Greek thought. So this is not new. And yes, I am fully aware that there are other modalities of thinking outside of that which began with Greek thought. One of these days I will do a video on Jewish hermeneutics, which contains a lot of things that are nonlinear and non-rational, and there's also a place for that. Please pay attention to the case that I'm making as opposed to instantly rejecting it because I'm only quoting one particular path of world history. There's actually a reason for it. All right, so the appeal to ignorance is very simply saying, hey, listen, you can't disprove what I'm saying universally, and so therefore it must be true. And that's the logical fallacy. And some of you may have seen in some of my videos this guy that I pop up on occasion, right? A few different versions of him, the flying spaghetti monster. This guy actually came to be as a way to address this logical fallacy. The idea that people within certain religions, especially those that have an obligation to convert others to that religion, who sometimes will use arguments such as, well, you can't universally disprove the existence of my God, and then the fallacy is, therefore, my God must be true. So the flying spaghetti monster was created as a counter-reaction to that, which is one of the best ways to deal with this logical fallacy, saying, well, you can't disprove the existence of the flying spaghetti monster as the Lord of all, so therefore, and, you know, if someone were to then take the flying spaghetti monster seriously to me and say, hey, you can't disprove that the flying spaghetti monster is God, then my reaction could be, yeah, well, I worship the pink fluffy unicorn who belches marshmallows, and you can't universally prove that they are not God as well. So this is a pretty easy one to get around, but we use it quite a bit. And if you go back to the origins of this logical fallacy, we actually start seeing some of the subtlety. We're pretty black and white with it today, but the original idea was if you are in an argument with someone else comparing the amount of proof that you have, the logical fallacy was essentially, you have less proof than I have, therefore my argument must be true. And the reason that that is really a logical fallacy is think of all the people who are engaging in conspiracy theories. Now, listen, I know that there have been true conspiracy theories, the Gulf of Tonkin, that sort of thing. When you look at people who are trying to convince us of these various different conspiracy theories, you're going to almost always get a start of something we call the Gish Gallop. Not going to go much into that. Gish was someone who was part of the Creation Research Institute, believed that the Earth is less than 10,000 years old, and he used to debate back when I was at university, he used to debate people on college campuses, scientists who would go in thinking, oh my goodness, this is going to be really easy, and audiences polled afterwards would say, oh my goodness, I think the creationist won. Well, the reason is Gish would throw out 10,000 things that sounded like facts, and all of them disprovable, but you get so many things out there that you can't even react to them, and so the audience perception is going to be, be, well, person one had more facts and the other person couldn't refute them, even though it would be impossible in the time allowed. So therefore, you see this in conspiracy theorists all the time, that facts are thrown out. Well, the existence of a whole bunch of facts, if they're bad facts, well, first of all, they're not facts at that point, but throwing out a whole bunch of information does not make something true if I don't have as good of information. If the argument is against me, I'm not a specialist in that particular thing, so therefore I might not be able to disprove it. But my inability to disprove something does not necessarily mean that my opinion is the wrong opinion. Again, this is not the end of any conversation, because part of what this points to is our obligation, if we're going to step into an argument, to actually educate ourselves on what it is that we're talking about. All right? That was the easy one. We got it out of the way. Well done, everyone. Deep breath. Good. Okay, the second one is the appeal to authority. Now, we're getting into universal stuff on the interwebs right now. We are getting to how we do our arguments. Now, what the fallacy is, first of all, what the appeal to authority is saying my point must be true because Albert Einstein said this, or my point must be true because Jesus said this, or Moses said this, or, all right, fill in your blank. Now, this is where we start getting into difficult information, because it doesn't mean that it's wrong to appeal to authority. But by saying it's not wrong to appeal to authority, we're going to already start getting into the instant reaction that we have emotionally sometimes, which is, well, wait a second, are you actually saying someone has less value than others? Here's how that works. If I want to get my hair cut, thankfully, my wife is doing an amazing job, I think, cutting my hair since COVID began. Saved a lot of money, and she's keeping me look probably, I guess, as good as I can look. But let's say I was back in the day when I used to spend a fair amount of money trying to keep the gray out. The opinion of my hairstylist when it came to what to do with my hair was more value than the opinion of my general practitioner, right? That should be really, really obvious. By the same point, as you see how I've reversed the usual argument there, when it comes to what medications I should be taking, the opinion of my doctor is a much more authoritative opinion than that of my hairdresser when it comes to that. So when we sometimes say that some opinions are more valuable than others, that does not mean that some people are more valuable than others. If I am living in a cave 30,000 years ago, the hunt leader is a hunt leader because they are the person who knows how to keep us alive. They are the authority. Their authority is more valuable. Therefore, we require authority. And that makes us very uncomfortable in a world that is trying to do away with hierarchies. But in certain things, hierarchies, they are absolutely necessary. And I want a doctor who actually knows what they're doing and has a really good education. I realize some people might disagree with that, but that is a type of appeal to authority that's not a logical fallacy. The appeal to authority that it's a logical fallacy is I need to replace, or I'm allowed to replace, my obligation to bring facts to a debate that are then provable facts, that I replace that with a quote, that I replace that with so-and-so said, that it must be so. And if I quote a good authority, then at least that is a part of the argument, but it doesn't mean it's the end of the argument. And in the world of the internet, especially in the world of social media, it doesn't matter where you go, you're going to see a type of appeal to authority, and it is in internet memes like this one and this one from one side of thought, one from another side of thought that I've seen in just the last few days. And these are posted usually to end an argument. Now, people on the internet have known for a long time how silly these can be, even though some of these are great quotes, and some quotes I disagree with, and some I agree with. But then you see this one right here, which is actually not actually what that person said. And you see this one here that is just mocking the entire idea. I know, I love that, obviously. But yet we really do this. We have our point that we want to make, and we think that we close off the point by posting the authoritative quote. Well, problem number one, there's usually more nuance to the argument than we get with one person. Two, not everyone who's authoritative in one thing is authoritative in another. Back to the doctor argument. I want my doctor giving me medical advice. I don't want them giving me fashion advice, right? And then vice versa with my fashion advisors. So not all authority is then universal across all things. And then finally, well, let me go by way of example. Here's a quote that I have been dealing with and have been meditating on for about 2 weeks now since I first heard it. All right, you see it? Here we have it. Resentment is like swallowing poison and hoping that your enemy dies. Something we're thinking about, something that I am thinking about myself. But the point here is this is meant to be not a mic drop. It should be an open mic. If I actually post a quote and think that that's closed the discussion, then that is the logical fallacy. If we post a quote, then that should be the beginning of the discussion. Of course, if we are having life and death discussions on the internet, we're probably making another fallacious mistake to begin with. Story for a different day. All right, deep breath. On to now the most difficult out of all of these, and that is the appeal to emotion. Now, the appeal to emotion can be appealing to positive emotions or to negative emotions. This, I would say, is how we are functioning in society today, and there's a reason for it, because it works. It's rhetorically incredibly powerful. So let me give an example that I saw on the internet. I'll paraphrase because I don't have the page right in front of me, but it's a dialogue between several people in a company, and the one person says, listen, this initiative that we're about to do, we've gotten all the studies through and we see that it has absolutely no effect whatsoever. And the other person says, listen, we need to show our community that we're doing something. That's an appeal to emotion. Right? We have the facts here that it doesn't work, whatever that initiative is, but yet we sit there and say, oh my goodness, if we don't do it. One of the good examples that's really falling away in the Jewish world is for many, many years, the idea is we are going to lose membership if we do not stay contemporary when it comes to our offerings. And so we had the prototypical bowling club that was put in for years. And if you've gone to URJ biennials, if you're an American Reform Jew, for the last several biennials, there's a lot of discussions on how that model didn't work. And the reason that it still gets passed on through boards of synagogues on occasion is we need to feel like we're doing something to bring people in. Well, yeah, but if the bowling club is done better by the local bowling club anyway, then that is an appeal to emotion. We have to keep our membership, but it's not actually a factual way or a proven way. We're actually introducing a usable argument into what can make a difference. Okay, that's the easy stuff. Now let's get down to the most difficult part of this discussion, because I want to separate this out. We have, as human beings, an obligation to listen to other human beings. Why? Because we want other human beings to listen to us. Basic ethics. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, or that which is reprehensible to you, do not do to someone else. The Jewish formulation of that, meaning that if I would find it reprehensible for people to ignore me when I'm trying to speak an emotional truth, then I would not want someone to ignore me when... Right, you get the idea there. So it's basic ethics. Now, here is the idea that is so difficult. On the right, for example, when the appeal to emotion is put out there, then all conversations that are based on emotion are then completely discounted. And that's not where this needs to go. Because part of people expressing truth, especially when that comes from traumas, especially when that comes from their unique experience that I certainly don't have, how much can I learn from listening to other people? Now, for the hard part. Here's why it's a logical fallacy. You can't make policy based on that. And I know that seems awful, but here's why that's the logical fallacy. Here's why the appeal to emotion cannot be universalized. Let's take it to religion for a second. I have been, as someone who wears this thing in public, today for safety reasons, I usually have a hat on over it, but for many years, this was worn out in public, especially on airplanes and that sort of thing. And the amount of people who have begun telling me that I need to convert to their religion because of, usually there's something very negative that's going to happen to me if I don't. But a lot of the argument is an appeal to emotion. And that appeal to emotion will then include the anecdote, the witness, where, all right, my life has changed so much because I used to be in this horrible situation, and then I had this conversion experience, and now I'm in this situation. And that's the first part of it, the logical fallacy that because someone else had this incredible experience, that then demands something of me. Now, the second part that oftentimes comes from these is by you rejecting my strong emotional appeal, then you are a bad person. And this oftentimes comes from inside a tribe, from parents and that sort of thing. When one of us leaves a religion of our birth, how dare you hurt me so much after everything I've done for you? Yeah, you see where I'm going with this. So when we actually step into everyday conversation on the internet, you need to listen to my emotional truth. Yeah, you actually are obligated as a human being, if you're connected with me, in the same way I'm obligated to listen to the words you're saying and to listen to the truth of your actions. But we can't actually change policy based on that. And why is that? Well, our assumption, hopefully, is that someone who is telling their story is telling a truth, within their emotional truth. But if you take the set of all human beings, you've got a certain percentage that will always tell the truth, a certain percentage that will always lie, and the rest of us are in the middle, which means that there are times that, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. There are times that we are manipulating others through our emotions, whether consciously or unconsciously. And if you universalize the idea that all laws and human behaviors are controlled by appeals to emotion, then it means that we have to universalize either that both the good actors and the bad actors have equal access to that societal change, or we somehow believe that someone could be in the position of separating the two. And that separating the two is not usually done on some sort of lie detector test. What it's usually done is the narrative of the person listening. So if someone's emotional truth matches with my narrative, they're telling the truth. If someone's emotional truth does not match my narrative, they're not telling the truth. And this is why it gets really uncomfortable. So right now, in the groups that are talking about centering people's emotional experiences, their unique experiences, and the emotional truths that come out from them, we need to, as humans, be a part of that. If you're coming to this through Judaism or curiosity about Judaism, we are deeply interconnected. That is so critical. But if I am using an appeal to emotion, I have to understand I have no right to ask anything of you other than to understand that I'm as much of a human as you are. I can't ask you to change your behavior because of my appeal to emotion. Yes, I'm going to use it in some ways like that. You have really hurt me, for example, is an appeal to emotion. But I still can't control you. You either take that seriously and are in dialogue with me, but if I use that cynically, every time I want to change someone else's behavior, I say, you've really hurt me, then look how the universalization of that so quickly can destroy relationships. So appeal to emotion is the beginning of a larger relationship. It's a part of the piece of the puzzle, but it cannot be the end of any argument. All right, we got through that one. If you want to hear more of these, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to start a new series next week. Thank you for your patience while I was gone. We've got a podcast coming up next week. We are now fully running back into our usual schedule. As always, part of how we finish every one of these shows is to remember, lift someone else up. Don't tear them down. Within Logical Fallacies, this is, let's start communicating with each other in a way that we lose some of the ambiguity and the control, because we don't want people to control us through what they say. So let's stop using broken arguments to control other people's behaviors. Let's be the most honest version of ourselves that we can. And if someone has no desire to be a part of that, then they're probably not connected to us in a way that's going to make them community anyway. Either way, our obligation is to lift each other up. In doing that, everyone is lifted up. And with that, I say thank you for being a part of Beit Virtuali. We'll see you next time.
Adonai